Alice Earll and I'm the violinist from Ensemble Molière. In this video we're going to be having a quick overview of the Baroque violin. We'll start by introducing the basics of the instrument and then talk about what makes an instrument Baroque, including some examples of techniques and playing styles and a quick comparison of modern and Baroque instruments. So, going back to basics. The violin is a wooden string instrument, the smallest and highest pitched instrument of the violin family in common use. The other instruments in this family include the viola, cello and the double bass. The violin typically has 4 strings which are tuned in fifths with the notes G, D, A and E, and it's most commonly played by drawing a bow across the strings. It can also be played by plucking the strings with the fingers. This technique is called pizzicato and sounds like this. The violin as we recognise it today emerged in the early 16th century in Italy and has changed relatively little since that point. But what makes a Baroque violin different from the violins we see today? A Baroque violin is a violin set up in the manner of the Baroque period. The Baroque period spans from roughly 1600 through to the year 1750. The term includes original instruments which have survived unmodified since this period, as well as later instruments and modern replicas that have been adjusted to the Baroque setup. The most obvious differences between a Baroque and a modern violin are that Baroque violins have strings made from gut, that the violin is not fitted with a chin rest, and that they are often played without a shoulder rest. But there are also technical differences, which are perhaps less visually obvious, and these include the angle of the neck and the nature and style of the tailpiece, fingerboard, bridge and bass bar. You may notice that the modern violin often makes use of an adjuster placed on the E string to allow the player to fine-tune more easily, whereas Baroque players will often tune their strings exclusively with the pegs. I'm also using a Baroque style bow. Bows underwent more changes within the Baroque period than violins did, so there are lots more different examples of historical bows, from the earlier stick style or clip-in frog bows to the longer Italianate bows with a screw mechanism. However, the main differences between a modern violin bow and a Baroque style bow are that the stick of a Baroque bow is convex. This means that the stick bends outwards away from the hair. The bows are often lighter, often shorter, and use a narrower strip of hair. They also have a pointed pike's head or swanbill head as opposed to the modern hatchet head. The screw mechanism, used to control the tension of the hair on most modern bows, was first seen around the middle of the 18th century in France. It was a great improvement, and as such has since been adopted for most Baroque style bows which are made today. Typically, a Baroque violin is played in a historical manner, using musical styles and techniques intended to resemble Baroque performance as far as possible. But because these techniques had fallen out of use long before recording equipment was invented, modern day performers rely heavily on documentary evidence and Baroque imagery to recreate a Baroque style technique. Part of this historical recreation is also how the violin is held. From its roots as a dance instrument in the Renaissance period, the violin was often held low down on the body. This meant that the left hand was less mobile, and as music evolved and became more virtuosic, performers experimented and the violin gradually migrated to the shoulder position, which allowed people to drop the chin to provide stability and more bow expressivity as well. Gradually, people added chin rests and shoulder rests to give the left hand even more freedom and allow performers to play harder music with comparative ease. When you listen to someone play the Baroque violin, one of the most obvious differences is the sound of the gut strings. They create a warmer, more textured sound, but project less well than their modern metal equivalents. Here's an example of the Baroque violin with gut strings, followed by the modern violin with metal strings. You might also notice the change in pitch between the two examples. In the Baroque example, I'm playing at A equals 415 Hz, and the modern at A 440 Hz, which is a semitone higher. There are many discussions around historical pitch, as it was by no means a standardised system. However, many historically informed performers choose to use A415 as a practical compromise in order to go some way to recreating a historical performance. Thank you for joining us for this whistle-stop introduction to Baroque violin, and if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to ask in the comments. We'll leave you to enjoy our arrangement of the opening prelude from Charpentier's Deum, filmed on Baroque violin and accompanied by harpsichord played by Satiko de Luck.